Pulchra is ZenlessZoneZero's newest free A rank, and she also happens to be the first ever physical stunner. This makes her one of the more interesting characters to test, as we've now waited a long time for this physical and stun pairing to exist. Before we get into that though, I do want to say that I've actually been very interested in Pulchra, Moors, and the Caledon related characters for a while, so finally having access to her makes me wonder if they'll eventually release old story characters as future A ranks too. With that out of the way though, today I'll be going over how to make Pulchra work best for your potential teams, while also ensuring that she's as powerful as she can be. Now, as we get into the video though, I'd like to remind you all that the footage from today's video will be from the creator beta server, so things are subject to change. However, with this out of the way, let's now break down everything about Pulchra. Pulchra's role on a team is that of a swap heavy stunner, but truthfully, while her gameplay loop might sound complicated at first, it's much simpler than it seems. She first prioritizes entering into the Hunter's Gate state via an EX special attack, assist follow-up, chain attack, or ultimate, but after this, she looks to stay off field while still utilizing the enhanced daze generation that she gains from her enhanced form. This is because of the way that Hunter's Gate and her special attack Rending Claw and Nightmare Shadow work, as Pulchra is forced to stay off field in order to actually utilize the special attack's strikes. To explain further, here is how Nightmare Shadow works. When not the active agent, Pulchra will perform dashes against enemies, dealing decent damage in daze. But this is only activated if Pulchra's allies first use a special attack while she's in the Hunter's Gate state. After the special attack, if her allies then follow this up with additional strikes against an enemy, Pulchra will repeat her dashes while consuming this resource at the top left of her screen up to 5 times. Do note that this can also be increased to 7 times with her Mindscapes, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. After these additional strikes / unique resources are consumed, Pulchra can also choose to swap back onto field, exit the Hunter's Gate state while doing so, and actually re-enter her Daze Enhanced Hunter form again through any of the previously mentioned methods. Next, let's talk about Pulchra's kit, starting with her core passive and additional ability. Pulchra's core passive is what describes Hunter's Gate and its effect. When Pulchra uses an EX special attack, assist follow-up, chain attack, or ultimate, she is granted a new form which increases her daze output by 30% for 6 seconds. This also comes with additional features and perks too though. If Pulchra switches out while in Hunter's Gate state, this effect remains until she re-enters the field. To add to this, landing a heavy strike while in this form will also trigger a quick assist from the previous character. That's not the only thing that this form affects, as it also influences how her special attacks work. Her additional ability activates when an ally is an attack character or from the same faction, and once active, she gains a new passive when she lands a hit with certain attacks. To be more specific, when using Rending Claw, Nightmare Shadow, her EX special attack, her assist follow-up, her chain attack, or an ultimate, she applies Binding Trap for 15 seconds, increasing the aftershock damage against a target by 30% for all allies. Now, while this ability does sound designed to buff only Soldier Zero Ambi right now, it is also worth knowing that activating her 6th Mindscape changes this ability to be more versatile and usable for all allies. Moving along, we also have Pulchra's basic attacks. Now, you might have recently heard comments about Pulchra's basic attacks being less useful or to avoid using them, but to explain why that's actually the case, it's mostly because of Pulchra's EX special attack, her Hunter's Gate state, and Rending Claw, Nightmare Shadow, all contributing towards her wanting to be off field and her not wanting to spend much time using her basic attacks. This is also the case for Pulchra's dodge related abilities, as spending any extra time on field with Pulchra takes away from her team's potential DPS and her own ability to make use of Nightmare Shadow. On that note, let's now talk about Pulchra's special attacks, as these are the main abilities that showcase her strength. To start, Pulchra's special attack, Rending Claw and Nightmare Shadow, has a unique effect when she's in the Hunter's Gate. When an ally lands a heavy attack, whether from a normal or EX special attack, Pulchra dashes back and forth, piercing enemies around the target and dealing physical damage. If an ally continues attacking after this, she can actually repeat this move up to 5 times, which, as I mentioned earlier, you can track via the resource bar at the top left of your screen. This is where Pulchra's strength lies, as she deals the most daze and damage with this ability. Additionally, this attack does inflict aftershock damage, making Pulchra an excellent pairing with characters like Soldier Zero Ambi, even if you don't have any additional Mindscapes. Her EX special attack, Rending Claw Flash Step, also acts as a decent damage dealing ability, but this skill is definitely used best to either dodge enemy attacks or to re-enter or enter the Hunter's Gate state quickly. Unlike Unlike Pulchra's basic attacks or dodge counters, her assist-related skills do actually provide value to the team. Her assist follow-up in particular applies the binding trap from her additional ability and also acts as a way for her to enter into the Hunter's Gate state. As you'd imagine, this is very helpful since it provides Pulchra with a non-energy method to enter into the Hunter state while also not needing to use an ultimate or chain attack either. Pulchra's chain attack and ultimate are similar to each other in the sense that they deal decent damage, but keep in mind that they both also provide Pulchra a way to enter into the Hunter's Gate state, which again is the core gameplay mechanic that she focuses the most on. Before we move on, it should be known that Pulchra does have plenty of optimizations to make her perform better, but it's also viable to just keep her gameplay simple and allow her to stay off field until she needs to replenish her additional attacks. For skill upgrades, leveling her core passive, followed by her EX special, chain, and then assist is priority, but after this, it's actually pretty rare for Pulchra to even use her dodge or basic abilities, so it's fine to skip these if you want to save resources. For those of you looking for a stunner with a low skill floor that's easy to pick up, look no further than Pulchra. This is no truer than in regards to her combos, as she only has 3 options to consider, as her priority again is to just get into the Hunter's Gate state as quickly as possible. With this, one of her first combos that you can perform is to use an evasive assist, continue with an assist follow-up attack, and then perform a quick assist with your main DPS. Her second combo is similar, with her performing an EX special attack that activates her Hunter's Gate state, and then following this with a quick assist. Finally, as her third combo, Pulchra can use her ultimate and follow this with a quick assist just like with her other options, and this will also grant her the Hunter's Gate state as well. To be clear, all 3 options are viable for the purpose of getting into the Hunter's Gate state and then being able to use Nightmare Shadow alongside her allies. It is also worth knowing that each of these options has their own niche where they work best. When out of energy, using her first combo and performing an evasive assist functions best. When energy is available, using it to quickly enter into the enhanced state can be powerful. And finally, if no energy is available and your ultimate gauge is filled, using this to generate daze or damage can be powerful too. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is also an argument for Pulchra being played similar to Astra Yao or Bernice, where optimizations aren't always necessary and you can just simply keep these agents off field until you casually refresh their resources. But Pulchra does actually have a lot of optimizations alongside buff timings and alignments that she can perform if you're looking to maximize her damage. To start, because her traps only apply for 15 seconds, lining up her buffs alongside powerful main DPS skills or your chain attacks is one of the optimizations that is very important. Now, while this one is pretty obvious, there's actually one lesser known tech or trick that players can use to maximize Pulchra. This trick, known as a dodge parry, is something that has existed since the closed beta, and it allows players to perform a dodge counter on a character like Ambi while also activating an evasive assist with Pulchra simultaneously. This cuts down on extra animation time and can keep Ambi's damage consistent while still generating her star mark. That said though, a trick like this is definitely not necessary for either her or Pulchra's teams in order to do well. As a side note, this tech is also usable on other characters that aren't Ambi and Pulchra, but it's definitely worth looking into specifically if you enjoy this combo, as they both have great reasons to use dodge counters and assists themselves. For Pulchra's W engine, she does have a few options to choose from, and amongst the A rank engines, Steam Oven, Fossilized Core, and her own signature all performed great. Now despite this, Box Cutter was by far the most consistent and high performing from my testing / calculations, especially if it was rank 5. This is mostly because of how easy it was to maintain and activate its passive, but that doesn't mean that others didn't perform well too. Interestingly, a close competitor to Box Cutter was actually Hellfire Gear, which did end up yielding great results too. In fact, this actually ended up being equal to, if not slightly better than Box Cutter. Now despite all this, the best W engine that was tested and found today's quickest was Blazing Laurels, regardless if part of the passive effect on this W engine was completely unusable, and this is because of its base impact being higher as it is an S rank engine compared to Box Cutter, and also because of the added impact from the first line of its passive. Now, recommendation wise though, Box Cutters, Blazing Laurels, and Hellfire Gear are all amazing options for her, but I would definitely recommend using her signature if you manage to receive multiple copies of it, and otherwise use whatever you have upgraded, including things like Steam Oven or Fossilized Core. Regarding build, Pulchra has a clear synergy with Shadow Harmony's 4-piece effect as it pairs well with her, but this also doesn't mean that it's her only option. Astral Voice in Protopunk Produktong's 4-piece effects both offer decent alternatives to this DPS set, where buffing a team may prove helpful too. That said, in terms of her 2-piece options, Shockstar Disco is her best choice given its relatively unattainable impact stat that it provides. Something also to consider here is that the substat rules on discs do play a major part in which set to use for agents, so if a disc drive set has way more rolls than another, that is very good reason to choose that one over the others. But now it's time we talk about stats. Pulchra values crit rate, crit damage, and attack when paired with attack agents, as she is a semi-DPS in most cases, but it is also worth mentioning that she can be built with anomaly proficiency if you end up pairing her with someone like Jane. Now, despite this, when it comes to main stats, these are the following options that will best suit her for general use, and especially if you're using her with attack agents. For her 4th slot, a crit rate or crit damage main will be ideal depending on your substats and which rolled better. For her 5th slot, physical damage percent or attack percent works well. And finally, for her 6th slot, impact is the only choice given that she is a stunner. Now, while her damage is noticeable at times, swapping her main stats depending on the team's buffs or if you're using her with an anomaly team can also contribute towards higher DPS. This means that avoiding overcapping of stats like damage percent when paired with characters like Astro or Lighter can be worthwhile, but overall these optimizations aren't as significant as they sound, as simply taking the main stat with the most rolls on it will end up being the most impactful of all. With this, here are now my recommendations for disk drive and main stats alongside a sample stat line. For disk drive set, I recommend 4-piece Shadow Harmony and 2-piece Shockstar if you're focusing on Pulchra's damage more, but otherwise I would actually choose Protopunk as my 4-piece effect if I were looking to buff my allies. 4th slot crit rate or crit damage, or using anomaly proficiency if you're using an anomaly team is ideal, but for her 5th slot, physical damage percent and 6th slot impact will be ideal. And now finally, for her sample stat line, you're looking for 2000 attack, 50 crit rate, and 100 crit damage, or as much anomaly and attack percent as you can find if you're choosing to go down that route. Moving on to mindscapes, this is actually very important for Pulchra's performance as a whole. Pulchra's initial mindscapes are decent, as buffs from mindscapes like her first are helpful to herself, but these honestly aren't game-changing by any means. This is also the case for her 2nd and 4th mindscape, with stat bonuses or minor energy cost reductions helping Pulchra's quality of life or build, but not much else. However, the most important mindscape among all available is her 6th, which increases the damage of her Nightmare Shadow by 15%, while simultaneously increasing its total possible hits to 7. Now, while this is fantastic, what truly makes this mindscape incredible is the additional effect that it has, making her additional ability, Business Partner's Binding Trap, apply to all damage types, not just aftershock damage. This means that Pulchra becomes more versatile and usable as a general stunner, and not just as a stunner that can only be paired with aftershock DPS. Like with my recent Ambi guide and teams piece, I recently tested every Pulchra team in a separate video. And with this, if you're interested, you can take a look at the results there if you're curious about Pulchra's pairings. However, in today's video, I wanted to summarize the results of my Pulchra research and give some thoughts about potential teams. As always, Miyabi, Yanagi plus Pulchra, a main DPS plus Pulchra and Astra, and any variation of this were frequently at the top of clear times and damage performance, but I'm sure you already knew that or could guess that they would perform the best. Because of this, I first wanted to instead include and break down a few of the other teams that found success too. Let's start first then with Evelynn, Pulchra, Lucy. I'll be honest, this trio had a lot of potential and cleared much better than I expected. The buffs in 6th mindscape from Lucy, the off-field nature of the team, and Evelynn's desire to stay on field so she could build embers created a perfect synergy between the three. Evelynn constantly grouped enemies together, wars rained from the sky, and all of this contributed to a pure solo DPS Evelynn feeling showcase, with Pulchra and Lucy supporting from off-field. This did require a decent amount of swapping and managing buff timers to be successful, so consider this before you end up using this team. The next team worth discussing was ZenlessZoneZero Ambi, Pulchra, and Nicole. This team also surprised me in terms of performance because Nicole wasn't even being used for her AoE in tests where she performed best. With just the ability to activate Pulchra's Nightmare Shadow, Nicole had boosted the team's overall DPS by a significant amount. Similar to the Evelynn, Pulchra, Lucy team though, it is worth mentioning that lining up Nicole's defense shred alongside every Ambi smite was pretty difficult. However, even assuming moderate uptime and leaving some room for leniency / optimization, the team was very impressive despite not even activating Nicole's additional ability. Not that she really needed it though anyway. The final topic I want to discuss regarding teams for Pulchra is actually in relation to the strong teams that I mentioned earlier. Pulchra, Astra, and a DPS like Evelynn or Ambi definitely felt incredible, as the main DPS was allowed to stay on field almost permanently, with only a few brief moments where supports or stunners had to reapply buffs. Miyabi, Yanagi, Pulchra also felt great as a constant swapping team, but this should be no surprise as Miyabi and Yanagi as a duo are arguably the strongest in ZenlessZoneZero. Adding Pulchra to this mix really didn't affect their gameplay loop either, where Pulchra was simply an extra amount of damage and daze every so often. That said, though this team's incredible performance was definitely not held back by Pulchra, it would be pretty dishonest to say that the team wasn't heavily influenced by having two powerful DPS. Overall, while I haven't listed every single team composition possible with Pulchra, I did want to address a few comments that I saw when it came to Pulchra. First, Jane's performance with Pulchra was both decent and weak depending on the team used with her, and this was because Bernice was essential to Jane performing well. Beyond Bernice, every other team used with Jane ended up being disappointing, way slower, or just ended up dealing way less damage than acceptable. In my initial testing with these teams, I had over 4 or 5 teams with Jane alone that were clearing at half or worse the performance of Bernice Jane teams, with the only exception to this being with Astra. Despite the Astra team doing well though, I still ended up clearing 20 to 30% slower than some of the other competitive teams. Now, while I only addressed Jane here, this was the case for many other DPS that were asked about in my comment section, so I want to promise you all now, it wasn't so much that I was neglecting them, it was usually either that the team was mediocre, they were missing an additional ability, or they were just actually outright terrible. Side note, I also couldn't fit 300 screenshots and talk about every single team, as well that would actually take a year to do. Anyway though guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you again for watching. As always, if you learned something from today's guide, feel free to like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. Check out the rest of my socials, Discord, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, etc. And thank you again for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.